welcome to Speak as One. I'm Julie Coriath. Today we have with us Dr. Jessica Garza. Hi, Dr.
Hi.
Jessica. How are you?
Doing well. How about you?
Good. You're not only just a wonderful person, because I've gotten to know you personally, but your credentials are out of this world.
Well, thank you.
And so much so, I can't remember them all.
No, you're good.
So I'm going to ask you to tell our audience just like a little bit about your career and who you are.
Well, I'm Dr. Jess Garza. I have several different degrees. I have a master's in mental health counseling, a master's in sport and exercise psychology, and a Ph.D. in performance psychology as well. And lots of certifications behind there as well. I am a licensed counselor here in the state of Texas and Arizona, a national certified counselor. I'm also a project management PMP certified. I am a certified mental performance coach as well, so working with a lot of different professional athletes, tactical populations, which I've done for the last 14 years, working all over the U.S. and internationally. I'm also a TED speaker on the big TED stage, and that's enough.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like when people start these careers, there's usually a reason behind it. Is there a reason behind you wanting to get into, mental health? And
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't think I realized it at a younger age what I wanted to do. I definitely knew what I wanted to do when I was a sophomore in high school. And then it kind of all wrapped up the same, like getting to the point that I'm at today. So in high school, I was a gymnast, competitive athlete, and I also played soccer as well. I was a head case as a gymnast, had mental blocks left and right, but I was really good as a gymnast too, though. Nobody was out there helping athletes at that time that I knew of, or that my parents knew of, to help athletes through when they had mental blocks or self-confidence issues or second-guessing, doubting, all the sorts. Super competitive though, so I overcompensated in other ways to get through it, but just didn't know that there was certain techniques to make that transition easier.
Can you tell me a little bit? Sorry, I want to.
Yeah, you're good.
I'd love to know a little bit, and for our younger audience to know, what are some of those things that you struggled with while you were a gymnast?
Yeah, I was terrified throwing skills on some of the different apparatuses. I didn't trust myself that I could do it. And so I relied heavily on other people's validations that I could do it. And even then, sometimes it didn't last. Mm-hmm. I would doubt I'd not necessarily doubt, I would get super nervous before meets where I would feel like the shakes, or I'd have to run to go to the bathroom really quick and then come back, but didn't realize that wasn't nerves. It was actually my body being primed to get ready for competitions. That was probably majority of my thoughts back then, was like, well, what if I get hurt? And all the what if statements that I created in my head that then caused me to doubt or have skill loss or not do the skill and just avoid it completely.
Yeah.
And so that's growing up for gymnastics had happened. And I had also been a part of the USA Gymnastics sexual abuse cases. I had experienced that with my own coach. And so that was my senior year in high school. So sophomore year, I saw this little paragraph in one of our psychology books that discussed sports psychology. Not very vague, but I'm like, that's what I want to do for a living. So I knew my sophomore year that's the way that I wanted to go. And then my senior year is when I experienced, sophomore to senior year with my gymnastics coach. My senior year, I had quit the sport completely. So something that I was looking to do into college. I quit the sport, decided to leave and transition, ended up getting a got picked up for soccer out in Arizona. So transitioned sports within 2 months and did soccer in college at Grand Canyon University.
Did you make that decision because of what was going on with your coach?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't. It happened. The bigger incident had happened my senior year in December-ish time frame. And I got so sick. I had told my mom about it. I had told one of my other coaches about it. We thought that it had gotten submitted to USA Gymnastics. And then, 15 years later, I get a letter when Larry Nassar and all their stuff comes up saying, what would you like to do with this? And I'm like, is this a joke? And talk about every flood of experience and memory coming back. I felt like the 15, 16, 18-year-old kid at that time of like 30 something years old, but going back to that state all over again was just, it was something that I hadn't obviously experienced before because we hadn't like really processed. And I didn't get counseling for it. I didn't have any assistance through it. We just didn't know what to do at that time. So yeah, once all that USA Gymnastics stuff came through, then I went through the process, ended up getting an attorney to represent, and still didn't necessarily have the closure because ironically he's still coaching right now. Because of the statutes of limitations, I couldn't press charges, I couldn't do anything, so it's unfortunate. But through it, I've been able to help understand other athletes that have had similar issues, and since then I've gotten the assistance that I've needed because I believe in it. But yeah, that was a big part of where I'm at and why I'm at now. And when I got picked up for soccer instead, I'd moved out to Arizona and had several relatives that were doing gymnastics, and so that was the first time I'd walked back into a gym since the incident, or incidences. And when I got into the gym, like just that flood of like, oh, this is what I love. This is my home. I've been doing it since I was 3 years old. Like this is what I dreamt of doing for the rest of my life, or not rest, but most of my collegiate career. But when I got out to Arizona, I started my degree in psychology, and then went into my master's degree for mental health and started working at some of the, jail systems out there. So I was working with domestic violence and sexual abuse cases, and early release programs for the jail systems, which taught me really early on, like that environment wasn't for me. It was a great opportunity to work in those environments, but I had gotten pregnant at that time, and so working with a lot of the sexual abuse cases, they would get super graphic in the stories that they had done to these innocent kids. And I'm like, if I don't get off these cases, I'm already starting to get jaded. I might end up in here myself. And I was showing at the time. So my professor was like, well, you should go work with the military at that time. I said, no, thank you. I just want to work with athletes. No desire to. And so he ended up submitting my resume in with the military and got picked up within the next week or two. Went out there. My sister lived in New York at the time. I was like, well, this will be a nice free trip to go see her, so that's great.
Out there to West Point?
Out to West Point, yeah, okay. Which had no idea about anything. What you don't know about the military, you don't know. Like, you're so naive at the very beginning of it. And I went to West Point and fell in love with the campus and the culture and the soldiers. Like, it was just amazing. So they had told me by the time I had left the building that I was getting a offer and that I got to pick where I wanted to go. So chose North Carolina at Fort Bragg to work with special operations. And at that time, my daughter was 10 months old. And it was just her and I at the time. So moving across the country with just her and I, first big girl job, and I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know, but this is gonna be fun. And then started working with the tactical population with sports psychology as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see, one, how you've gotten to this point, and two, how you've just been able to help people in various areas. Because I'm sure, like, when you started coaching again, when you were in Arizona, I'm sure that, like, once again, that was you said that's like your home, that's your safe place. You know, hopefully it was healing for you and being able to give back to these young girls.
Yeah.
And then, you know, completely pivoting your whole career to something you wouldn't plan on doing. But, you know, it's a part of what you're saying, too, which I think is so important, is listening to your intuition. So you may not have expected to work with the military or go out to West Point or any of these things, but something inside of you felt right.
Yeah.
And that's so important that we listen to that, because when it's that strong, I believe that's your guide.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And to be super transparent, I was also ready to get out of Arizona. My daughter and her dad and I weren't together at the time. So I'm like, I just need to change. I'm ready for it. Ready to just get out of my environment and start new. So that was nice, but it was really hard. And at that time, I was also having postpartum depression. And it took me leaving to North Carolina to actually finally connect with my daughter at that time. So there was a lot of even mental health things that I didn't know. She was my firstborn. I didn't really know about postpartum depression at the time too, and what you needed to do for it. We knew that I was in that state because that whole pregnancy was a little bit tough. But yeah, so that was one of also the reasons why I decided to move and to just connect with her, because my mom was helping and assisting, and she was doing an incredible job helping when I couldn't be there for her emotionally, attentively. But that one put me in an environment where I had to step up as a mom and like pay attention and embrace what motherhood was like while working a pretty high intense job too.
Right. And so a couple of your points in your life that were really centered around, your mental health changing, one was when you were a senior, but there wasn't a lot of knowledge of how to go get help then.
Yeah.
But here's a point in your life, still not a lot of information about postpartum, but you know about it, and there were some ways that you intentionally helped yourself. So for those women out there that are going through postpartum, is there can we touch on that just a little
absolutely.
bit? Some things that you recommend, how to understand it. Is it just lack of sleep or postpartum? Can you tell us the difference?
That's a good question. So on my second child, knowing that that was the case, that I should more likely to have it again, and if not a little bit severe than the first time, I was very open with the physician ahead of time of just the state that I was in, and he knew the situation that I was in too. So communication is a really big one, and then the support team that you have and letting them know like there's the ups and downs on top of just pregnancy alone. But just what you're feeling, and then them helping like safe words to recognize like, ooh, we're starting to trend downwards, or you're starting to have more like quiet spells or avoidance between each other. And so the support team is a really good aspect to you, like shifting out of those states or just recognizing what you need to do. A lot of self-care was a really big piece to that. So I went in for like massages or like walks, like nature, like just getting myself regrounded and reoriented helped a lot to not be stuck in the cycle of like, why me, and that depressive episodes.
And I think a lot of times then women feel that sense of guilt, like, oh, I'm supposed to be with my baby, or I'm supposed to be connecting with my baby, which I hear is one of the big signs, like if you feel like you can't connect.
Correct.
But really taking that time to take care of yourself is helping your child.
100%, yes, which is what I brought my mom and my dad in. They came in to live to help support that, because it's hard, and you do feel so guilty. And then when you're trying to share the story of, the most joyous time of like, here's your baby, and you're like, I'm struggling to want to hold her, I'm struggling to want, and it's not that I don't love her, like, oh my gosh, like I'd be lost without my daughter. But it is a really hard thing to accept in those moments where it's just like, why am I not wanting this at that moment? And it can last for a very long time. Like mine lasted probably 9 to 10 months before I had to force myself in a position where I couldn't rely on additional help. I had to find a way to connect and do all the mom duties. And that was like the best thing that I could have put myself in for that position.
So getting help, whether it's with family or seeking a therapist, getting additional help, and then maybe sometimes if you don't feel like connecting, just kind of almost forcing it a little bit.
Yeah, putting in a position where you have to attend to the responsibilities, because you're not forcing yourself when you have the responsibilities ahead of yourself. So if I look at it like I have to do this, I'm forcing it, and it's like this is a responsibility, like I have to do my job. That's a responsibility to be able to provide for my family. So I saw it as these are my responsibilities that I'm attending to, rather than feeling like I'm having to force myself in this position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I think that, it's hard to think of it in terms of exactly what you're saying. Like you want to be able to just come from this natural instinct place where it all feels. Yeah. And even I'd say, because I didn't struggle with postpartum, but it's for some things that are supposed to feel so natural, they just don't. Yes. So whether you're going through that or you're not, it's a hard road, and being able to think of it in these terms of like, I have responsibilities I have to do, may not feel like it's this glowing mother thing that we're supposed to, be experiencing, and that's okay.
Yeah, and everyone's timeline is different. Some might feel it for a couple months, some might be 10 months, some might be even longer than that. And then on my second child, my son, I knew that was going to pop up already, so we had done some meds at the very end of my pregnancy to make sure that it was just stabilized. Some of those medications caused me to have more ideation type of thoughts than anything else, so we did a really low dose just to have the ease of it, and then to get off of it quickly and to start doing just more nature type stuff and music and like just upbeat things that I knew that kind of revived my soul for me personally. But when my son came, it was easier of the transition because I knew what was to come.
Okay.
Or when I felt the emotions, I knew what to do in place to be able to help mitigate some of the guilt or emotions. So I didn't feel it as intense with my second one because I was a little bit more prepared.
Okay. Thanks for touching on
Yeah.
that for us, because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And we could probably keep talking about it. But and maybe we will another time have
There
an
you go.
episode based on that. But yes. So you're here in North Carolina now, and what does that look like for you? You're kind of experiencing some postpartum.
Yes.
And you said she was 9 months old when
She was
you got
like
there?
10 months around
10
that time.
months.
Yeah.
Okay. So experiencing postpartum, starting this new job.
Yep.
Completely new state.
Yes.
You've moved. How did that transition work out?
Beautifully. I like change.
Mhm.
I am not shy of change. I'm not shy of challenges. I thrive off of them. So if you put me in something new, I feed off of it.
Mm-hmm.
I was super excited about the new population. These guys were high caliber guys. They still are. Their brains are just phenomenal to be around, and the group of professionals that I got to work with are also elite professionals in their field of sports psychology and kinesthetic backgrounds, or they have physiology backgrounds. So just when you put us all into a room, energy and creativity, it was exciting to be around. And most of the time I was in awe of the environment, of how much these guys could push past their limit, which is why I went to school for the things like, how do we bring out the best in each other? How can we bring out the best in others and raise potential? And that's what we got to do every single day, which was incredible. And then really learn what teamwork looks like within our own collective space, and then how those guys and women also worked as a team too. So
Yeah. How long did you stay there?
I was there till 2014. So I'd gotten in North Carolina about 2011, so a couple years. And then I had moved to Arizona to another military installation and worked there till about 2020. So,
And then you came to Austin?
And then I came to Austin in 2020. I had left the military in 2020. I married a soldier, and at that time he was experiencing some PTSD towards a couple years into our marriage. Couldn't recover as much as I was hoping in his states. He wasn't seeking the services that he needed, and as a counselor myself, as a mom of two and a business professional, it was really hard to try to balance it all. And so I ended up choosing to leave the marriage in 2020. So another really big transition again. We both moved to Austin thinking that it would help his mental state, that we could start fresh from his environment, because we both worked together in our space up in Arizona. He was an interrogator, and you have the psych in the same facility, and so interrogation and psychology may not always mix. And we didn't learn that for a couple of years. But great guy, just, one of those things, it's really hard to, when you're stuck, and it's hard to get yourself out of those stuck places. And so we ended up separating, and at that same time, I had gotten into, or I started to, what did I do? It was at the end of like May-ish time frame. I was looking to open up a business in sports psychology, and I'd gotten sick at that time. So I'm in the hospital with a hysterectomy, and the hysterectomy goes south. This is starting in July, and 4 or 5 surgeries later, this is like now October, November, I've been in the hospital in and out. This is during COVID, so my kids can't come up.
Oh my goodness.
At the same time, I'm trying to open up a business.
And because you thrive on challenges, even in this situation, are you like, I'm going to figure this out? Or are you
Not
in so much-
necessarily.
Okay. I'm like,
I wish I could say
how are you handling this? I have to know.
So he ended up leaving in May. I just had the surgery in July. So we're going through the divorce as I'm having the surgery. The doctor nicks the uterus. Not great. They fix it up. I go home 2 days later. They had an emergency bowel surgery, didn't see anything. Get released the next day, and I go septic. And so I'm back in the hospital that night. I have a nephrostomy tube, catheter in for 12 plus weeks. Then they have to do a complete reconstruction of my bladder and uterus, cut it in half, replace it on a different site. While I'm in the hospital, I get told that I'm prolonging this divorce. And at the same time, I'm also being told, Jess, you either fight or the worst is happening. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like the world just felt like it was crumbling. At the same time, I'm also talking to the business in the bank about funding this company in a lease space that's 2,600 square foot. So on moments where I'm like, okay, not when I say okay, like energized enough to have a conversation, I'm putting a background in the back, having a business call with the bank, and I'm like, yeah, everything's great. I'm not hurt. I'm fine. Like things that, the beeping noise, I don't know, maybe construction or something. So that I can get the loan funded, and then I'm calling the attorney like moments after saying like, go ahead and sign the divorce papers. So I'm in the hospital doing both of these, and then still trying to fight for my life at the same time, because there was a moment, several moments where it was turning for the worst. There was a couple times where like I was full on gray, like I just looked like there was no soul in there. And I got super depressed towards probably like the third or fourth surgery. I was done. And that was when the doctor had come in and it's like, you can't, like, you got to fight, and then I'm like, I can't leave my kids alone. Like, then you have to find a way. And one of the ways that kind of brought me back to life was one of my friends had sent me a sermon, and it was about like God breaking you down into like kind of like a phoenix, like into the ashes and reviving you. But not only that, it was I needed to shed everything so that you could hear my voice, so that you know my voice fully. And when I say go, you know to go, or when I say stop, you know when to stop. And I'm like, that's it. Like for whatever reason that clicked. Yeah. And I'm like, because I have been asking even through like the process of my divorce, and is this right to do this big giant loan for this space that I have no business really doing, but I felt called to do it. And so I'm like, can you just make it louder so I can hear you? But I'm like, okay, we don't have to go through that level of extreme for me to hear you. That would be nice not to go to that level, but now I get it. And so once I understood it, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I got re-energized. Coming in and out of the hospital with bags, like my catheter bag and my nephrostomy tube, and I'm picking out paint colors and designing this whole studio, and finally got it opened up this year, which is exciting. It's been open technically for the last year, but actually in the space ready to go. And I have my own first Mind Gym here in Austin, Texas.
Yep, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yes.
Yeah, and I can so relate to what you're saying, the messaging that your friend sent you, because when I was going through just the darkest time of my life and having to go to trauma treatment, and I'd stopped drinking and all these things, you know, it's just like, what are you doing to me? And I was praying that, and I was feeling a lot of anger around it. And I had read something similar, and I almost felt just like that cleansing of soul and that like almost rebirth. Like I needed that part of me needed to say, time for a new chapter. Like this part's gone.
Absolutely.
And now it's almost like a rebirth.
For sure.
I really felt like that.
Yeah. It took a little bit longer. I mean, yes, I do. I agree with the rebirth. And it didn't take until probably January of this year because my body started to have a lot of reactions to the medications. And I just had my last surgery with it in this past November. So it was like surgery number 6. And I'm like finally out of the woods, but I started to swell from inflammation, and I couldn't walk with joints. So in between like sessions with people, I'm like in massive amount of pain, but still trying to be energized. And so that it took a toll. And then I'm finally at a place where I'm like, this is where I'm at. We're feeling good. And it's nice.
So happy to hear that for you.
It's good.
Yeah, and people can find you in Leander. That's where your office space is.
At the crossover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an amazing space.
The place is called Ultier.
Yeah.
And it's a 2,600 square foot, and it's a mind gym that works on vision training. So athletes, not just athletes, but you have tactical populations, police and soldiers, EMS, that really look at peripheral training, decision making, your eye muscles. If your right eye is not as strong, then I'm developing your eye muscle in your right eye by blocking it out or blocking your left eye out, making your right eye extend a little bit more. In work, we do a lot of biofeedback training. We do a lot on confidence and how people view themselves, and a lot of energetic states too. One of the things that I think I've been most interested in my journey the last couple years because I'm so analytical and because I am a counselor too, I've done my own level of counseling, and I'll sit across from a counselor and I'm like, if you would have just asked this question, we would have been down this road, and could you not just ask this and I can give you this answer? So I'm already psychoanalyzing the other person and knowing what questions to ask or what I feel like they should be asking. So I have a really hard time in the counseling sessions. So I had found this amazing person who's kind of like my energy healer. So we worked more somatically through energy for me and the states that I feel and how to transition that energy into matching what I want out of life, and rather than staying in the past and reflecting on that, working on where I am currently and where I'm wanting to go, which was an awesome transition. So that's kind of what I brought into the space too, on how does it feel somatically, where are we at energetically, and then what does that do to our thoughts, emotions, and physiology.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that's one of the things we want to highlight here is there's so many different types of ways to get help. And sometimes it may take you a little while to find the right person, and that's okay.
For sure.
Because it's a small amount of time in your life to really go in and say, I need to focus and work on myself. And to find the right person to be with you on that journey is so important.
Yes.
And you have a long life to live. So this amount of time when you really need to, and I mean, for me, I'll always be working on myself. But I'm saying I do think that for certain people, if you're really going through a hard time and you're having a hard time getting out of it, it might need to be a more focused
I would agree with that.
Intensity around it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That, and I think that the other part that often gets misconstrued is that I have to go see someone when something is wrong. Like, I've had my person for the last 3 years now, and things are going really well, and it's my container of support. Outside of my family, that's a different level of support. Outside of my friends, that's a different level of support. And so really understanding the type that you need and the container that you have, that you can feel like they're really bringing out the best in you.
And I want to highlight the different things you were saying about your gym. When I knew that you were doing the eye movement, it was really important for me. And I've touched on this here and there, but when I was 42, I found out that I had 20 different visual processing disorders.
That is
I didn't
wild.
know my whole entire life I was struggling with the reading, and a visual disability that affected my reading and my comprehension and my confidence.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
big time.
I never, just was constantly struggling. So it's so important, I think, for people to even test on that, because a lot of times, too, they'll say, well, you might just be dyslexic.
Right.
But, like, when I learned about the visual processing, I realized that they were like, we need to fix your eyes before we can even know if you're dyslexic.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, how many people are going through life and all they need is like a little eye gym, which is what you have.
Right. Yeah. My daughter is another one that's been affected by it. So we had just gotten her glasses last year, and her eyes are more like almond shaped. So when she tends to bring her eye focus in, her eyes start to, bobble back and forth. And she's had some difficulty with reading. She's on an IEP plan and all the things. But had I known that it was just her eyes that couldn't stay in a steady focus, because she'll read letters, I think like one of them was dog, but she'll say the letter G at the end could be like something completely different just by the way that it looks. And so she'll mix up the letters, like D might be B or something like that, and it looks like bog. I don't know. Or look, she could shortcut it because she could just see the two O's, but she would guess that look is look, or she would say look is took, and then she'll mix the two words up. But the eye doctor, when we had gone to an actual specialist, was like, no, this is just her eye muscles that are struggling, and the way that her convergence and everything else in between. I'm like, this is so heartbreaking, one, because we've gone to the pediatrician. We went to the eye doctors, and
it's totally different.
Nothing says anything. Nobody says anything.
I had 20/20 vision my whole life, so
wild. Yeah.
No one would ever think there's something wrong with my eyes.
Agreed. And so then like headaches and everything else in between. And so some of these athletes come in and they're coming to catch a ball and their eyes are doing this. And so they're wondering why they can't catch regularly, or why it's a hit and miss sometimes, or why their right side is slower than their left side. And it's because the right eye might be actually trying to turn and process and like pick up slower. And so it is a very misunderstood thing, and I think it's one of the best things that we've been able to implement in our gym, into our
Yeah.
Sports Psychology Center.
A few things you can do at home is one, if you feel like your child or you bring up your finger, like both eyes should be able to come to your finger to your nose.
Yeah.
So when it happened with me, my left eye flipped out to here.
Oh, wow.
Like my left eye went out here, couldn't even come in. Like she couldn't even come any closer. There's no way my eyes could converge.
Wow.
And then another thing is just getting a pencil and seeing if both eyes can follow the pencil, or having them read with one eye and then the other. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are really good at-home ones. I like it.
So
that's awesome.
So I think one of the things I'd like you to do is, kids are struggling, I feel like, right now more than we can even imagine. And it's hard growing up when you're a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't imagine what they're going through right now. There's so many different layers. Mm-hmm. The statistics are staggering. And I'd like for you to, try and talk to a younger audience.
Yeah.
And if they are having a hard time explaining what they're going through, can you give them some feedback on how to express themselves or how to talk to a parent or a friend if
that's
they're
a really
going
good
through
question.
something?
One of the things that I often talk first to adolescents most about, and I usually say this it's the self-awareness piece, and I go back to emotions of what they're feeling, and we put it into the body. Where do you feel anger? Where do you feel happiness? Where do you feel sadness? And where is it exhibiting on the body? And then once I start to gain awareness on what emotions are, what they're labeled as, and where I'm feeling it, we talk about keeping our own superpower. Most of the times, because there's so many different dynamics that are happening at home, at school, at practices, with coaches, they're just constantly intertwined, social media, with others. And so they are just like balls of little strings that are constantly being attached to all this different stuff. And if I'm letting these little strings constantly filter the way that I think, do, whatever, without cutting the strings from them and letting myself operate, myself and not everybody else being my puppet, to do that, you have to own yourself. You have to own your superpowers and not give them away. And so how we're reacting and how we're responding is usually a sign that I've given away my power, and how I communicate that. So if my daughter came home, she's 12, pretty flustered, I give her the space of like, do you want to share what's going on right now? Or I acknowledge, or I see what's going on. So I say, I can see that you're upset right now. Do you want to talk about it? And typically that age group is like, no, leave me alone. It's like, okay, well, I'm here for you when you're ready. And that's all I say. I'm here for you when you're ready. And then let her decompress when she gets home, however she needs to decompress. And then usually they want to share. They want connection just as much as us adults want connection, to be heard and to be seen. They are no different than us. We just tend to be like, well, whatever, you didn't want to talk about it, so I'm going to go on and do my own thing.
Right.
And we dismiss it, or when they're ready, you're not ready because you're occupied.
Yeah, well, and then that's touching on something in us.
Yes.
That is like, oh, they can't handle it, I can't handle it.
Right. Yeah.
Or they're being dismissive, and that's, might touch on our insecurities.
Right. Well, it's like, fine, when you're ready, I'm not going to be ready then.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of saying, okay, let's try to address this later in the day, which sometimes we all need.
Yes. And so once they come to you, then you are just a sounding board. You are not the solver. You are not the fixer, unless they ask for that level of assistance. And we tend to do that as adults to one another with our friend groups. And so when you start to realize that, this kind of goes back into 4 ways of different styles of responding to our peers and loved ones, that when we try to relate to people, we often do what we call like the one-upper, or we try to pick out all the bad things in that, or we dismiss what's really going on. So those 3 type of styles tend to lose connection or lose trust that they can come to you to be their safe haven for good and bad news. And so when you're in there, you either multiply the joy, or you sit there in there and be empathizing to them, or with empathy. And when they say like, well, what should I do about this? Then you let them help explore those complex problems. Well, what do you think we should do about it? Let's come up with 2 or 3 solutions. I'll come up with one, and that might spark some ideas for you to come up with the other 2, but not giving them the solution, because then we lose the ability to problem solve and help them think about these complex problems, or dismissing what's going on. Like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, they'll be over it tomorrow. Girls just fight. Boys just, are rough and rugged, whatever the, terms that we want to put on people. And so when we dismiss them in their world, it is a big thing, because that is all that they are feeling and seeing. And so, yes, we have maybe gone through it, and we know now at this age that it's not that big of a deal. But to them, it is. It is their world.
My son called me out on that one time, and I haven't ever done it since. Because I was like, it's not. I was like, Liam, why are you worried about this? It's not a big deal. And he's like, it is a big deal. And I'm like,
yes.
I just immediately thought, oh my gosh, you know, when you think about yourself, if you can try and put yourself in that age, at that time when things were a big deal for you and you weren't feeling heard, it's the same thing. And I was like, oh shoot.
Yeah.
You know, I have to, I just realized I had to rethink the way I do things.
Yeah. But most people don't. I mean, I can't tell you. And we do it thinking that we're helping them, being like, everyone's going to get over it. And it's like, yes, that is probably true. But for right now, how can I help them soothe whatever the big emotions are?
Right. And then that creates connection. That creates safety.
Yes.
That creates a dialogue where they're going to want to come to you. And when it might be a real big deal.
Yes.
You know, it's kind of like that cry wolf thing. Well, if you're going to dismiss and not think that their small problems are a big deal.
Yes.
Well, then when there is a big deal, they may not come to you.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yep. So those would be some of my ways that I would probably approach the adolescent group.
Okay, great. So where do you see yourself going now? Up to this point, you've, you know, had an amazing career. I know that's not stopping, but I just would love to know where you are now and where you see yourself going.
That's a good question. I think about this question quite a bit, and every time that I've ever planned, like, my 3-year, 5-year plan, does that ever go the way that I think? No. Never. So at this point, I'm really learning to trust where I'm at and being okay with where I'm at, and knowing what's to come will come, and it will become in the most divine, most magical way possible. And I know that sounds super fluffy, but that is where I'm at on a spiritual level and where I'm at energetically. And the most miraculous things continue to pop up when I allow things to happen rather than force it. So I am no longer trying to be the will of attraction. I am allowing the will and law of attraction to come to me. And I've seen so many, I mean, our connection that we've been able to build, like, that was just out of the blue. And those type of relationships and moments and experiences is what I'm getting the most out of it. And with my business, what I foresee in the future is I want to have multiple Ultier locations. We are the first mind gym in Texas. There is nothing that is commercially given, or not given, like built for the normal population. You see these cognitive performance centers in universities, and you see them in like really big places like IMG and Exos, or in the military in those installations. There's nothing for kids at a younger level unless you hit college and pros. And so we're waiting until then to educate these kids on mental health, on understanding being self-aware, self-regulation, and emotional intelligence, social beings. So the center I hope to have more of, so that we can hit more people and populations in a way that gives them the information and resources that they need.
I love so much that, you know, you're talking about the here and now, and staying in that, because I've always kind of beaten myself up that I don't know how to plan the 3 and 5 year scenarios. And when I've tried, like after my divorce, I thought, well, we're going to move into this small condo because we're just going to be here for 2 years, and then I'm going to get remarried. And no. You know, when you try to control life, and instead of letting it happen, it can feel like a disappointment.
Oh, for sure.
And when you can really be present and really allow that to, you know, those attractions to come into your life, and be open-hearted, open-minded, it does feel so much more joyful. I think it just allows you to live a more joyful existence. And I think that, you know, that was I mean, I've always struggled with mental health, but I think after the divorce, that's one of the things that kept feeling like why I was always so disappointed, or like life wasn't working for me, because I'm like, why am I not remarried yet? Why don't I have a job? Why don't, you know, why am I still in a condo? And instead of, you know, and gratitude, excuse me, gratitude is so important, but there's more to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Than just feeling gratitude, because then I would beat myself up for not being grateful. I
know, it's like this weird rabbit holes that you can get to really fast.
when you can try to stay present,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to do sometimes all day long,
I
but
would
just,
agree.
give yourself 1 minute a day. Like today,
Yeah.
I'm going to try and stay really present for 1 minute. Awesome, you nailed it.
Yes.
Like if this isn't something that's
Yes.
totally new to you, then 1 minute is score. You've won the day.
That is good.
And
or
then-
what I've done
yeah.
too is I've reflected on past. So if I'm wanting to create abundance, like that's something that I desire. I would love to have more abundance of wealth, and to the point where it gets to generational wealth for my kids. When I'm in those states of lack, where I'm like, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough time, I don't have, like, whatever the enough is, the lack mentality, I need to go back to when one of my thoughts and memories is when I had just bought my house in January. My daughter and I laid on the ground and we're looking at the ceiling and we're like, I can't believe this is ours. And it's gorgeous, stunning home, love it. And we're sitting there just like in relief and in awe that this just all came together. This just, it's stunning. And so I can go back to that state where we felt like we were just full of wealth and abundance and joy. And so when I start to get back to that state energetically, I attract more at that level versus the level of lack. And I'm going to start to receive more lack because that's where my mindset is on. And that's what I'm attending to and filtering the world through. And so it will start to show me more areas that I have lack in.
Yeah.
And so to shift out of that, which is really hard to do because you're in it and you're feeling it, all the feels that come along with it. But to go back to, even if it's just a second of what that one joyous or excitement or whatever the feeling that you're wanting to create, go back to sit into that experience to then allow something else to pop in.
Yeah. Well, this is an experience I'm going to pop back into because you've just provided us with, not only, thank you for just being totally transparent about your life, which
Thank
will
you.
help so many people, but also just the tools and resources that you're giving us, is on both levels. It's just so incredibly helpful to have this like knowledge and things that you're bringing to the table and the things that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it more than
Yeah.
you know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.